This tale is about a man who, despite facing numerous challenges, found the strength within himself to forge a new path to happiness. It is a story of betrayal, love, struggle, and triumph that will touch your deepest emotions and make you reflect on life. The mobile phone rang at the most inconvenient moment, interrupting my concentration on the task at hand. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw an unfamiliar number. Worried that it might be a sales call, I picked up. It turned out to be someone even less welcome. "May I speak to Mark Mallon?" a formal voice asked. I confirmed that I was indeed Mark Mallon. "Please wait for Miss Peterson," the voice commanded. Instead, I chose to end the call. As expected, within a minute, there was another ring. "Mr. Mallon, apologies for the disconnection. Please wait for Miss Peterson," the voice said again. I ended the call once more. Soon, the phone rang again, and this time, a frustrated tone was evident from the caller as she tried to explain the situation. I cut her off. "Please tell Miss Peterson that I'm not interested in speaking with her today or any other day." After hanging up, I attempted to return to my task, but in 5 minutes, the phone rang again. Recognizing the number from the earlier attempts, I let it go to voicemail. The notification that I had a voicemail didn't tempt me to check it. By then, I had made up my mind about my project and started to organize my materials. The phone's ringing once more broke my focus, prompting me to switch it off. One of the initial lessons I learned about using power tools was the importance of focus. It wasn't just safer, but it helped time fly. Now, I was aligning the two 4x10 pine boards vertically with 16 inches between each. I placed the horizontal 2x4x10s one above and 2 below, using my tape measure to confirm everything was aligned. I began attaching each stud with a power nailer, securing them into the structure. After reviewing my work and deeming it satisfactory, I stood the structure up against the basement wall. Leaning on the structure, I located a pre-drilled hole on the lower horizontal board. I took the second nailer and secured the base with long concrete nails. A quick check with my level confirmed it was fine. I then secured the top, conducting another inspection to ensure everything was straight. On its own, it didn't look impressive in the bare basement, but I had erected the frame in 15 minutes. At this rate, I could finish all the framing by evening, moving closer to finishing. I was relieved that earlier tasks like installing conduit lines, electrical wiring, and HVAC ducts were completed successfully. Thankfully, the plumbing was already in place, sparing me that trouble. I plan to finish the framing tonight, install insulation and paneling on Saturday, and lay the wood floor tiles on Sunday. This would earn me my weekend treat, a 6-pack of beer chilling in my cooler. It amazed me that in a few weeks, the entire basement project would be complete. It was also a reflection of how I had limited my beer consumption to a single 6-pack per weekend, 2 beers a day after finishing my daily chores. Not long ago, a 6-pack was merely the start of a night of heavy drinking. This change was all thanks to Miss Peterson, Denise Peterson, my ex-wife. I couldn't help but feel bitter towards Denise, wondering how someone I had been so deeply in love with could become such a nuisance. I pushed myself to concentrate again on my task. The more I worked, the less time I would have to think, and the quicker I would finish, allowing me to dive into a warm shower and then drink the 2 bottles before heading off to sleep. If I was fortunate, there would be no dreams. That was the essence of my life these days, finding ways to keep busy so there wouldn't be any time for sorrow. With that final thought in mind, I started to prepare the lumber for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th frames, and so on down the line. I trudged upstairs for my drinks, a warm shower, and then bed. When I woke up, I remembered to switch my cell phone back on. There were 20 missed calls and voicemail messages, all from the same person as the day before. I deleted all the messages without listening to whatever demands Denise's assistant thought were important. As I got dressed, I was uplifted by the thought that I wouldn't be disturbed over the weekend. I went on my computer and addressed a few urgent business matters, sending out several emails on how to handle these issues. I then went downstairs. A quick visit to the kitchen gave me my bowl of Wheaties, and I ate my breakfast of champions with a sigh. I went back down to the basement, put on my mask, and began fitting the insulation rolls into the frames. I had a portable radio set to a classic rock station, which helped me pass the time, mixing the music with the sounds of my work and the occasional curse word. By mid-afternoon, I had finished installing the insulation and went upstairs to make a sandwich. As I consumed the turkey sandwich, I gazed outside at the dreary, rainy November day. It reminded me of another rainy November day last year. I recalled standing soaked outside my in-laws' house after arriving in Chicago on Thanksgiving morning for what was meant to be a surprise visit. I certainly had not received an invitation from my wife, kids, or in-laws. When the door opened, I saw the shocked expression on my brother-in-law's face before he could offer any weak excuse. I walked past him into the lively atmosphere of the house, which instantly became silent at my arrival. My 14-year-old son, Brian, looked at the ground, while Susan, my 17-year-old daughter, quickly left the room. My wife, Denise, got up from the lap of a stranger who had been holding her closely. Despite her embarrassment, she tried to downplay the situation by introducing me to Paul Starling, the stranger. He stood up and offered his hand, but I just looked at him until he withdrew it. Meanwhile, my dear mother-in-law hurried into the room to ensure nothing dramatic happened. At least, I thought I was making her carpet wet as rain continued to drip from my trench coat. "Why, Mark, we weren't expecting you. When did you get here?" I heard the woman, considered a witch, say. I ignored her as I attempted to meet my wife's gaze, but she seemed to find something extremely interesting on her mother's wall and refused to look at me. I returned to the entrance and stepped outside. I took out my mobile phone to dial the taxi company, hoping I would be able to hail the same taxi that had just left me before it went too far. Nobody from the house emerged to convince me to remain. I let out a sigh as the distressing recollection concluded. I made my way back to the basement to start putting up the panels. The task progressed swiftly because the panels, despite being cumbersome, covered a wide space. I employed panel nails to fasten them into the wall studs using my hammer. Fortunately, the panels, which had openings for electric sockets and heating and cooling vents, all matched flawlessly. Now, I could activate the heating system, but I discovered that I quickly became warm from the work, reducing the need for additional heating. I was content that I had prepared so meticulously, ending up with just a few planks and some extra panels remaining. I transported these to the garage and stored them for later use in the workshop. I fitted the electric sockets and finalized the wiring for each, following the standard color coding to avoid any mix-ups between ground and live wires. After connecting the system to a circuit breaker in the breaker panel, I verified that each new socket was powered and that there was proper airflow for the HVAC. It might not seem like a major achievement, but I attached the outlet and covers, then vacuumed the floor multiple times with a shop vacuum to prepare it for the adhesive I planned to apply the next day. But for now, a shower beckoned me. The hot water eased my sore muscles as I reveled in the steam. This was in stark contrast to the bone chill and cold I experienced returning to O'Hare Airport the previous Thanksgiving. I was both physically and mentally frozen as I arranged for a flight home, regardless of the expense. I knew my marriage was over. I just didn't know when a formal end would come. I dried off and chose to go to bed, looking forward to another lengthy but fulfilling day. I fell asleep almost instantly. On Sunday morning, I awoke to the sound of a thunderstorm brewing outside. I put on my jeans, work boots, and a t-shirt and headed downstairs, hoping we wouldn't lose electricity during the day. I tuned the radio to a sports channel to listen to the game, while I began to evenly spread the adhesive across the basement floor. I had thought about installing a custom oak parquet floor, but opted for pre-made tiles due to cost considerations. They were ready near the stairs. I waited for the adhesive to dry sufficiently before laying down the tiles. Then, I went back upstairs and mentally planned my next major task: sanding, staining, and varnishing the floors as efficiently as possible. I listed the equipment I needed to rent, including a floor sander and buffer, while the smaller tools like sanders, pry bars, hammers, brushes, and rollers were already in my possession. I had to be especially careful not to damage the antique baseboards or moldings, and I planned to catalog each piece to ensure they were returned to their correct places. I went to the kitchen to brew a pot of coffee. I surveyed the renovated kitchen I had completed a month prior. Bright fluorescent lighting illuminated the entire kitchen space, and the modern appliances gleamed. I positioned myself in the breakfast corner next to the new food prep island I had constructed. The new Mexican glazed tiles brought a vibrant atmosphere to the island. All I needed to do was remove a non-structural wall leading to a space that was once a small dining area for servants, greatly enlarging the overall kitchen. Even adding more shelves and a pantry made the space seem too large. I ultimately installed a brick pizza oven, which provided the perfect finishing touch to the kitchen. The idea of pizza reminded me of how I met Denise, and my thoughts wandered back in time. It was at a freshman gathering at a local pizzeria at my university. I didn't really want to attend, but my roommate convinced me. I was there sipping on my illegal underage drink when I noticed a tall, dark-haired woman nearby. She had an athletic build, long toned legs, and an incredible figure, and she was being bothered by a drunken guy. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but whatever it was, it earned him a slap across his face before he could retaliate. I stepped in between them to prevent him from attacking her. This didn't stop his anger as he tried to reach her, but I kept myself between them as he pushed me around in every direction. Eventually, the security staff arrived and took the man away. I turned and found myself gazing into the most beautiful green eyes I had ever seen. She introduced herself as Denise, and I told her my name was Mark. We chatted for a while, then she had to leave, and I thought that was the last I'd see of her. A month later, as I was crossing the campus, I heard someone shouting at me. This frantic woman dressed in a worn outfit with Greek letters blazing on the front ran up to me and asked, "Hi, do you have a condom?" My shocked expression made her explain that she needed it for a sorority initiation task. I could only nod and blush as I took out the condom I had been carrying since 9th grade, handed it to her, and she ran off excitedly to her sorority. Watching her run, I saw that stunning figure vanish. Another month went by, and as the campus geared up for homecoming, I was walking back to my dorm when someone began walking alongside me. "Hi, ready to save me for the third time?" she asked. I was puzzled and asked how I could save her this time. She explained that she needed to avoid going to homecoming with an undesirable date from a brother fraternity by having a date with someone else. Despite my sarcastic reply hinting at my bruised ego, she didn't catch on and told me where to meet her. Confused, I walked away, recounting the event to my roommate, who encouraged me to accept the date, cheekily suggesting I might get lucky. Despite his optimism, luck wasn't on my side. Instead, Denise and I spent the day getting to know each other, ignoring our inept football team and chatting through the game. After we exited the stadium, we opted to visit a tiny cafe to prolong our discussion. We were so engrossed that we didn't notice the establishment was closing until it was time to leave. On the way back to her place, I hesitated, unsure whether to attempt to kiss Denise. Denise made the decision for me by saying good night and departing without so much as a light kiss on the cheek. I interpreted this as a sign that I hadn't impressed her. As I made my way back to my dorm, upon arrival, I discovered my roommate was absent. I had gotten used to him not showing up until Sunday night. I lay on my bed and quickly fell asleep, Denise's green eyes haunting my thoughts. Over the next month, I attempted to contact Denise, only to find out she was never available. Eventually, I heard she had been seeing someone else. I was disheartened, feeling like I had missed my chance before it even began. A loud thunderclap interrupted my daydreams of Denise, and I resumed laying down tiles in the basement, fitting them together at their tongue and groove edges. I partially paid attention to the game on the radio, pausing only to fetch more tiles when necessary. After finishing the floor, I admired how well it matched the walls. Eager to continue, I secured the skirting boards in place, and with that, it was done. All that remained was to install the track lighting and crown moldings, leaving the decoration for another time. Today, I planned to celebrate. The business week was about to start, and I would devote my days to earning money. In the evenings, I might tackle minor chores around the house, saving my weekends for more substantial projects. That Friday, I visited Home Depot to rent a floor sander and buffer, loading it onto my work truck along with various grades of sandpaper pads for the project. Throughout the week, I had carefully removed and cataloged each piece of molding and baseboard, sanding them down in preparation. Using the sander, I would smooth the floors, knowing the edges would be hidden by the reinstalled moldings and baseboards, eliminating the need to sand right up to the walls. My phone rang another call from Denise's office. Calls from her had become frequent over the past week, leading me to add the number to speed dial for quick recognition. This reminded me of a call I received on a Friday long ago while studying in the dorm. Assuming it was for my already departed roommate, I answered, prepared to relay a message. "Where the hell are you?" the caller demanded. Taken aback, I inquired who it was. "It's Denise." "Now, where the hell are you?" she retorted, clearly agitated. Annoyed, I replied, questioning why she would expect to know my whereabouts. "Just come over here, pronto," she insisted. Despite my reservations, the prospect of seeing her swayed me, and I found myself at her sorority house shortly after. I announced myself and waited. Soon, I observed Denise vigorously arguing with a guy. Their dispute seemed intense, and her pointing at me elicited a disdainful glance from him. She hurried outside, announcing we needed to leave, and led me away. After a while, I halted, asking for an explanation. She angrily informed me that the same fraternity guy was troubling her again. Bewildered, I inquired if she could assist me. She retorted, "Why didn't you phone your boyfriend?" I pivoted and departed, finding myself back at the cafe where we had celebrated our homecoming date. She entered and settled next to me, initiating conversation. Before I realized it, I was no longer upset. Then, she expressed her desire to meet me, albeit with a minor condition. "Look, I find you appealing, but I'm not prepared to commit exclusively to one person. Hence, I wish to date you and others. If we're truly meant for each other, we'll both sense it. Can you accept that?" The thought of sharing her was unappealing to me. Then, she leaned in for a kiss, and I understood. I was hopelessly captivated. At times, I managed to secure a date with her, while other times, I'd sulk in my room, agonizing over her being with others. After 4 months, we became intimate in her car, deepening my affection. Despite my efforts to persuade her to wait, she persisted in seeing other people. This perplexing carousel continued for 2 more years until one day, she approached me with news. "I'm pregnant." Time froze. She assured me it was mine, anticipating my next move. Internally, I was panicking. With 1 more year till my business administration degree, followed by an MBA and a promising career, proposing to Denise seemed premature. Denise aimed to complete her history degree and proceed to law school, extending our education by 3 years. Suddenly, our plans needed revision. We deliberated and decided on a discreet wedding. I would work to support her through law school, and once employed, she would support me through my MBA. We envisioned a future of bliss. Then, turmoil ensued. Her mother, whom I dubbed the evil witch of the North, berated me for disrupting her daughter's life, relentlessly harassing me thereafter. My grandmother, who raised me, only demanded a prenuptial agreement to safeguard her house, which I was to inherit. Denise was initially furious but acquiesced after my grandmother's insistence. We proceeded with our modest, necessary wedding and began cohabitating. That final school year was challenging, with Denise's pregnancy and my array of odd jobs to sustain us. From landscaping to minor repairs and contract work, no job was beneath me if it contributed financially. Despite the hardships, we graduated. Denise welcomed our daughter, Susan, into the world and was admitted to law school. Her mother adorned her home with graduation and baby photos, excluding me. I secured an internship at a stock brokerage, undertaking menial tasks, but my persistence paid off, earning me a broker's license and a position trading stocks under a senior broker. As my proficiency and income grew, so did our expenses, with Denise finding new ways to deplete every earned penny. In her final year of law school, she announced another pregnancy. 8 months later, our son, Brian, arrived. Now, I was tasked with caring for a newborn, a 3-year-old, and a wife focused on finals in the bar exam. Despite the frustrations from Denise or her mother, I maintained my composure, understanding the importance of supporting Denise's aspirations. While she spent time with her study group on several occasions, I would briefly accompany them when they decided to unwind at a bar. I always departed early to care for our children and to give Denise some personal time. My priorities were not well received by some of the more competitive male members of the study group, who took pleasure in mocking me in Denise's presence. I was tempted to confront them physically, but I understood the negative effect it could have on Denise. Thus, I suppressed my frustration and acted as though I was unaware of being the target of their mockery. Eventually, the day came when final exams were completed, and Denise finished third in her class. Watching her walk across the stage at graduation with her children in my arms filled me with pride. She radiated happiness as she introduced me to numerous classmates before leaving to join a graduation celebration. She did not return home until 10 the next morning, explaining that she had stayed at a friend's place after feeling overwhelmed. I argued that she should have contacted me for a ride home, which led to an argument loud enough to upset her children, requiring me to spend hours soothing them. I chose to overlook the incident, considering the situation was already resolved and wanting to avoid distressing our children further. If I thought law school was demanding, then preparing for the bar exam was truly grueling. Denise and her colleagues dedicated themselves entirely to their studies day and night for 4 months in anticipation of the 3-day exam. I supported her in any way I could, from foot massages to late-night ice cream runs. Denise excelled, achieving the highest score on the bar exam. She quickly secured a well-paying corporate position in Dallas, prompting our move. I had planned to start my MBA at MU, but was persuaded to postpone this ambition. Denise argued that maximizing our income was crucial, as she aimed for a partnership at her firm. She assured me that once she achieved this, she would support my pursuit of an MBA. She convinced me of the importance of establishing a dual-income household to begin building our future. Thus, I found employment at a brokerage firm in Dallas. I soon discovered Denise's unilateral approach to our finances, reminiscent of Joseph Stalin's philosophy. What was hers remained hers, and what was mine was open for discussion. I was tasked with covering all our expenses, from rent and car payments to household bills, student loans, and more. In contrast, Denise's earnings remained a mystery, as every attempt to discuss her contributions led to heated arguments. We spent a decade in Dallas before Denise was transferred to Atlanta by her company. I proposed renovating my grandmother's house, which I had inherited, as a potential home for us. Denise dismissed the idea, likening the house to something out of the Addams Family. Despite my assurance that it could be refurbished within her budget, I believe her resistance was partly due to lingering resentment over my grandmother's insistence on a prenuptial agreement. Instead, Denise chose a house with a steep price and strict homeowners association regulations. I pleaded with her to think it over, but she was determined. Against my desires, I ended up signing documents to buy a house I disliked in an area I was not fond of, contributing dues to a golf club that was not to my taste. Once more, I switched careers to a brokerage firm where I found myself at the bottom of a hierarchy. I struggled to make ends meet, barely managing to pay our bills each month. The tension was straining our relationship, as she started to belittle me in front of our kids. The breaking point came when the house began to deteriorate, and the homeowners association demanded I undertake costly repairs I couldn't afford. Reluctant to approach Denise, I felt trapped. My latest job evaluation indicated I had maxed out my earning potential, suggesting I was trapped in my current position without prospects for growth. I sat down with Denise to discuss our dire financial situation, showing her the evaluation. Despite feeling embarrassed, she dismissed my concerns with scorn, claiming her mother had always been right about me. Feeling defeated, I remained seated as she walked away. The following day, she proposed a solution. Her employer was looking for someone to oversee their Chicago office indefinitely. Rumor had it that whoever took on the task would likely become the next partner at the law firm. She and the kids would stay with her mother while I stayed behind to fix our mess. Despite my frustration, I refrained from lashing out. It saddened me that the kids were not particularly distressed about being away from me. They were actually excited about moving to Chicago and being pampered by their grandmother. Saying goodbye at the airport was heart-wrenching for me, while they seemed keen to go. I returned home and wept. The next day, I met with the Homeowners Association board to present my repair plan, but they outright dismissed it, imposing strict conditions I had to meet. Despite the brief respite from my family's departure, I was still barely keeping afloat financially. I started with the easy tasks that required minimal expertise and tackled them first before moving on to the more complicated ones. It felt like for every task I completed, 2 new problems arose, and my resentment towards the money pit I inhabited grew. My attempts to reach my family were met with brief conversations before they hurriedly ended the calls. I started drinking excessively, which was looked down upon at work, but at that point, I didn't care. Time passed until the winter holidays approached. I asked Denise if she could return so we could spend time together as a family, but she said her schedule wouldn't allow it. I then suggested visiting them, but she insisted my focus should be on fixing the house rather than spending on travel. Moreover, Denise hinted that her family would be away for Thanksgiving, so my visit wouldn't make sense. However, Susan excitedly mentioned the family gathering at her grandmother's, and Brian shared his anticipation for attending a Bears game at Soldier Field with his uncle on Thanksgiving. Something didn't add up, and I reached my limit with the situation. I resolved to travel to Chicago, where I uncovered answers to questions I hadn't even considered, such as the ease with which I could be replaced. The most painful revelation came when I tried to reconnect with Susan and Brian after they turned 18, leaving numerous messages in vain, begging them to get in touch. They never returned my calls. 2 weeks after Susan's birthday, I received a big manila envelope in the mail. Susan had applied in Cook County to change her name from Susan M. to Susan Starling. She wanted to adopt the surname of her biological father, Paul L. Starling. Included were sworn statements from Susan Mallon and Paul Starling, claiming they had started a romantic relationship in college and continued through law school, which led to the birth of their daughter. This was verified by notarized DNA test results from 3 esteemed labs. Also included was the judge's order officially approving the name change. At that moment, I understood that when Brian turned 18, I would receive a similar shock. Denise called me. She inquired if I had gotten a package in the mail, and I confirmed that I had. She mentioned that the package was meant for her mother, but a clerical error caused it to be sent to me. She informed me that the clerk was dismissed for the mistake. No, Denise, I'm the one who has been making mistakes. The issue is, I've been making them for over 20 years. I ended the call soon after. I was served with divorce papers, although she earned more. She argued that I didn't deserve a fair share of our joint assets. What was hers remained hers, and what was mine stayed mine except for the house. Despite never contributing financially to the house, she expected to receive half of its value when sold. In essence, I would lose $400,000. I wondered about her reaction when she received the harsh property settlement agreement signed by me without objection. I then took some time to focus on the house, noticing the floors were sanded, polished, and ready for stain varnish. I felt proud of my work, knowing tomorrow I would apply the stain, and by midweek, start with the varnish layers to protect the wood. The chosen stain would complement the soft colors of the rooms I had painted. I opened a beer and toured the rooms, noting small tasks still pending, all manageable. I realized I needed another significant project to occupy my time and started considering options. Standing on the master bedroom balcony overlooking the vast backyard, an idea struck me. A large swimming pool with a connected hot tub, maybe even a pool house. Excited by the planning and permits required, I envisioned this project filling my summer, imagining various pool designs and estimating potential expenses. Then, I heard the sound of struggling and shouting from a front-facing bedroom. I saw a large U-Haul truck with a trailer attempting to back into the neighboring driveway. The driver struggled, resulting in the trailer getting stuck in the wet yard, wheels spinning fruitlessly. I rushed outside, tapped on the driver's window, surprising her. She looked at me bewildered as she juggled solving her dilemma and calming two young children in the front seat, tears streaming down her face. I inquired if she required assistance, and the expression of relief on her face warmed my heart as she tearfully agreed. I climbed into the driver's seat, adjusted the steering, and shifted into low gear. I gently pressed the accelerator to prevent the rear wheels from spinning and cautiously moved forward to escape the mud. To accomplish this, I had to navigate through more of her front lawn, but it seemed like the simplest approach. Eventually, I maneuvered the truck and trailer back onto the road, prepared for another effort. Driving a vehicle with a trailer attached is an unfamiliar task for many. The trick to backing up with a trailer is to steer in the opposite direction you would typically reverse, gradually. I directed the trailer up the driveway until both the trailer and truck were positioned in the driveway, ready for unloading. I switched off the engine and dashed, bent over to avoid the rain, onto the porch. The children cheered, and a wide smile appeared on the face of the blonde angel at that moment. I realized I prefer her smiling over crying. "Here are the keys," I said, as I handed them to her, placing them in her tiny hand. "Thank you so much for your help." I was at a loss about what to do next. Her voice carried the sweetest southern accent imaginable. "I'm always happy to assist a neighbor. My name's Mark Malone. I presume you're my new neighbors." "Oh, pardon my manners. I'm Jeannie Harris, and these two rascals are Kay and Billy." Her introduction led to a wave of objections from the children, who then clung to their mother, pleading for her to desist. I chuckled at the mischief, relieved that the ordeal was over, and everyone could unwind. "I hope you've arranged for help with unloading because the truck and trailers seem heavily loaded," I mentioned. Her face fell with a hint of sadness. "I had helped with loading, but it's just the three of us for unloading. Let me assist, and if necessary, I can summon some friends to help," I offered. Her expression of deep gratitude was my reward as she thanked me earnestly. I proposed to tackle as much of the unloading as I could on my own, and then we would plan accordingly. The trio vanished into their home, and immediate cries of dismay echoed from inside. I entered the dimly lit room to find Jeannie distressed, informing me the electricity was supposed to be active. I assured her I would handle it, and stepped outside to contact a friend at the electric utility. After explaining the situation and the address, he recalled being assigned to install the meter, but had found no one home, complying with company policy by leaving. He was slated to return the following Monday afternoon. They're here now, and it's a lady with 2 young kids. You owe me a favor, so please come and install the meter, then work out the paperwork, I persuaded him. He consented to arrive. After ending the call, I reassured Jeannie that the electricity would be restored shortly. She expressed her gratitude, and the children erupted into cheers once more. Then, I unlocked the trailer and started moving boxes into the barely illuminated area of the front room, aided by the rainy daylight. Jeannie carried the smaller, lighter boxes inside, while the 2 children observed from the porch, playfully disputing who would choose their bedroom first. Jeannie shot me a knowing look as she caught me watching the kids. I reminded her to leave the heavier boxes to me, taking a bulky box from her to add to the indoor pile. Just as we finished unloading, my friend John arrived in his utility truck. Within minutes, the house was lit up, energizing the children to scamper through each room exploring. John returned to his vehicle to fetch the documents for Jeannie to sign. "So, Mark, you've got everything unloaded?" John asked. "We're still working on the trailer, and haven't begun on the truck yet," I answered. Without uttering another word, John walked over to the trailer, lifted a box, and began carrying it indoors. This inspired me to make several phone calls, and I suggested to Jeannie and John that they take a break. We sat down, getting to know each other, and Jeannie shared that she used to be a primary school teacher. Before I could inquire how she managed to buy a house in this area, a group of friends arrived with their spouses and children, bringing pizza, beer for the adults, and soda for the children. More importantly, they came with a willingness to help. A flurry of activity followed as the truck was emptied. My friends' spouses were shown around the house. A group of children ran around playing, and endless discussions on decorating strategies took place. Boxes were opened, and their contents were distributed to the appropriate rooms. Furniture was unloaded, and bedroom sets were put together in the right rooms. Then, the living room was adorned, marking the completion of the truck's unloading. Afterwards, it was simply a time to relax and enjoy the company of friends. I was amazed at how quickly Jeannie took to hosting a spontaneous gathering of people she had just met. I then realized her friendly demeanor was swiftly making her new friends, as contact information was exchanged and lunch dates were set amongst the women. John leaned in, nudged me with his beer bottle, and whispered, "The thing these ladies have in common is you. Prepare for your ears to burn." I chuckled and then shared with him my idea for a swimming pool. As we brainstormed, others joined in with their thoughts. There I was, conversing with the men, and Jeannie chatting with the women, occasionally catching each other's gaze and smiling. Gradually, the party wound down, and all the guests departed. Jeannie let me carry the sleepy children upstairs to their beds, and she tucked them in, giving her sleeping angels a good-night kiss. Silently, we went downstairs, and then outside to sit on the front steps. I offered her a beer, but she declined, so I opened a cold bottle for myself and took a long drink. We sat there in silence, just relaxing. "Mark, you're my hero. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us," Jeannie said. "I'm just being a good neighbor." "There's no need for thanks," I replied. "That's nonsense," she insisted. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be stuck in my front yard with 2 upset children in a house without electricity. I owe you a lot." I laughed and responded, "Wait until you know me better," and took another gulp of my drink. Then, speaking of the truck, What do you plan to do with it? I asked. A distressed look crossed Jeannie's face as she recounted the nightmare of driving across the country in the truck, how she endured impatient drivers honking at her whenever she had to stop for gas, food, or bathroom breaks. Her lack of experience driving a truck had led to several traffic snarls at gas stations, fast food outlets, and motels where she often faced embarrassment and vulgar insults until she managed to resolve the situation. And now, I have to return the truck across the country, she lamented, explaining that the rental company demanded it be returned to their original location. Jeannie, I'll handle returning the truck for you, I reassured her. She looked at me, astonished. Mark, I can't let you do that. Jeannie, you can't put your children through another journey like that. I've got this. Don't worry about the truck. It's not as if I'm planning to abscond with it, and you know where to find me, I reasoned. She persisted in debating for a few more hours until my reasoning prevailed, and she handed over all the lease documents. When she inquired about the commencement of my journey, I informed her it would be at approximately 9 a.m. She suggested that since I was departing so early, perhaps it was time to end the evening. As we got up, she spontaneously embraced me and pecked my cheek, saying good night before I had the chance to respond. She was already inside. I felt a pleasant warmth as I made my way back home. The following morning, I knocked on Jeannie's door, and as she welcomed me, I was greeted by twin whirlwinds wrapping around my legs affectionately, calling me Mr. Mark. I chuckled, lifting them into my arms and stepping inside. Jeannie, with a hint of anxiety, passed me the keys along with an envelope stuffed with $20 bills, explaining it was for fuel and a boss fare for my return. Mark, please take care, she urged as I started the truck, reversing the trailer and vehicle down the driveway. Where are you returning? She queried. I grinned. Sooner than you might assume. I headed towards the interstate. Just before reaching the ramp, I detoured into the local U-Haul center. Upon entering, I encountered the individual I sought to meet. Hey Mark, what's happening? Greeted the store manager as we shook hands. Hey Perry, I'm here to return a vehicle on behalf of a pal, I replied, handing over the documents. Perry reviewed them, noting, Mark, this indicates it was meant to be a return journey rental. The vehicle and trailer are scheduled to return there. Well, Perry, circumstances have shifted, and this needs to be converted into a one-way rental. I'm prepared to settle any additional costs for the amendment, I explained as he made arrangements with the initial rental location. I noticed Perry's discussion becoming more heated, eventually exclaiming his determination to accept the trailer and truck. Then, he slammed the phone down, approaching me. Keep silent about this, Mark, he uttered. I merely smiled, presented the keys, and as he examined the truck, I offered a credit card to cover the conversion from a round trip to a one-way rental. He issued a receipt, and despite his earlier admonition, I expressed my gratitude. Subsequently, I stepped outside and hailed a cab. 30 minutes later, I alighted from the taxi in front of my residence. By chance, Kay and Billy were playing outdoors. Upon spotting me, their joyful shouts of Mr. Mark filled the air. Jeannie emerged to investigate, her eyes widening in astonishment at my presence. Please don't say you encountered an accident, she pleaded. I reassured her with a laugh that I had just returned the truck and trailer to the nearby U-Haul facility. She looked puzzled but at home. They insisted on a round-trip agreement for the rental. They wouldn't have leased it otherwise. When I spoke with the local U-Haul manager, he contacted them, clarified the situation, and secured their consent for him to accept the return. It was a fib, yet it harmed no one except the stubborn renters and addressed the dilemma, I explained. Jeannie beamed as I handed her the receipt confirming the transaction. Seems like you're immersed in fun, I remarked, noting her grimy attire. She confessed to underestimating the challenges posed by the house. I offered my assistance if things became too overwhelming. I then returned the envelope of cash she had given me earlier that day and walked back to my place. Despite the morning's delay, I swiftly finished staining the entire second floor and commenced on the first. The therapeutic effect of the task was now juxtaposed with thoughts of the attractive blonde next door. Realizing I was humming, a sensation I hadn't experienced in a while, was interrupted by a knock. Opening the door, I saw an anxious Jeannie. "I've got a plumbing crisis. There's a leak under my toilet. Can you assist?" "Let me grab some tools, and I'll head right over," I assured Jeannie, quickly assembling the necessary equipment before heading to her house. Kay and Billy were waiting for me at the entrance and announced Mr. Mark's arrival loudly to everyone. They guided me upstairs to the main bedroom, where I encountered Jeannie in the restroom, zealously drying up water with a towel. Wringing it out over the basin, I placed my tools aside and crouched, shutting off the water using the valve. I proceeded to drain the toilet, which unfortunately caused more water to seep from the toilet. I assured Jeannie that I would take over from there. She stepped back, attempting to discreetly take down her undergarments from the shower rod, hoping I wouldn't notice. I acted as though I hadn't seen her as she moved past me to stand at the entrance. With experience, I swiftly detached the tank from the water supply and lifted it off the toilet. As I suspected, the sealing wax ring was defective. I took off the old wax ring and replaced it with a new one from my own stock of repair items. Throughout, I explained each step to Jeannie. I applied sealant around the base of the toilet and carefully positioned it over the flange, pressing down on the toilet. I jokingly asked Jeannie to sit on the lid, explaining that her weight would help ensure the wax ring sealed correctly. While I attached the toilet to the mounting bolts, an amusing thought crossed my mind. After ensuring the seal was intact, I asked her to stand up so I could reconnect the tank. Once it was secured, I turned the water on and tested the flush, which worked perfectly without any leaks. Jeannie cheered in triumph. I then sealed the base with more sealant. The final steps were just cleaning up. Jeannie attempted to hug me, but I pointed out my wet clothes. She offered to wash them, but I reminded her it would leave me without anything to wear, causing her to blush. She suggested treating me to a meal, but without a car, she hadn't been able to buy groceries. They had been relying on takeout. I offered to go home, get cleaned up, and take them out for dinner. She worried it was too much imposition, but I insisted it was fine and promised to pick them up at 6 p.m. Come 6 p.m., I arrived at their place, and they approached my car. Jeannie was surprised to see that I had bought 2 booster seats for Kay and Billy. After getting the kids settled, we headed to a lovely Italian eatery. The evening was spent getting to know my new neighbors, with Kay and Billy eagerly sharing stories. Jeannie simply smiled as her children endeared themselves to me, occasionally sharing something private, making Jeannie blush and quickly changed the subject. After dinner, I took them for ice cream at a parlor with a play area for children. We observed them mingling with other children, playing. The pure affection on Jeannie's face as she watched her kids was a sight that has inspired artists for ages. She caught me looking and shifted her attention to me. "So you like me, Jeannie Harris?" I joked, causing her to blush deeply. I felt embarrassed when Jeannie suddenly made a revealing comment, leading her chat to drift into various topics, including the reason behind Jeannie's lack of a car. She clarified that her brother, an engineer, would be returning from duty abroad, and he would be using her car to get to them until his return. They planned to rent a car starting the next day. "Why not just use mine?" I offered. "I hardly use it since I mostly drive my truck." After some discussion, I managed to persuade her that borrowing my car was the most cost-effective solution for her situation. When we began our journey home, the children quickly fell asleep, exhausted from their activities. Along the way, I showed Jeannie the various functions and features of the car while she absorbed the information quietly. I parked in her driveway and carried Kay inside as Jeannie unlocked the door. I placed her on the bed, and Jeannie started to tuck her in. After fetching Billy, Jeannie was there as I settled him into bed. She cared for him attentively, and I realized I missed that aspect of family life. My sadness was apparent, and Jeannie looked at me concernedly. I reassured her I was fine, though she seemed to sense otherwise as I handed her my car keys. She tenderly caressed my cheek, stood on her tiptoes, and gave me a gentle goodnight kiss. I felt as if I floated all the way back to my place. Monday saw me back at work, unable to focus. My thoughts lingered on Jeannie. I shut down my computer and tackled various chores around the house, including finishing the stain on the first floor. Thus, it turned out to be a productive day as my list of home improvements gradually shortened. It wasn't about seeing the end of the tunnel, but rather moving forward regardless. I heard Jeannie's voice outside before a knock came. Opening the door, she greeted me, inviting me to join them for dinner after requesting 15 minutes to shower. I was told they'd wait. The dining table boasted fried chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits with gravy, corn, and black-eyed peas, complemented by the aroma of warm apple pie. The children debated sitting next to me, resolved by Jeannie suggesting I sit at the table's head with the kids on either side and Jeannie across. After giving thanks, we indulged in the meal. I savored every bite, including a hefty piece of apple pie, to the point of fullness. Later, I was roped into playing several games with the children until their bedtime at 9 p.m. When they headed upstairs, followed by Jeannie, she paused to invite me up. I read Billy a bedtime story, while Jeannie did the same for Kay. Once the children were asleep, we sneaked downstairs where Jeannie brewed coffee as we tidied up post-meal. She prepared a large ceramic mug for me. Upon learning I preferred my coffee black, she added cream to hers with a playful grimace. Mug in hand, we stepped outside to the porch swing. It was a pleasantly mild November evening as we sipped the steaming coffee. We started discussing Kay and Billy, and before I realized it, I was sharing stories about Susan and Brian. Then, the floodgates opened as I recounted the disastrous state of my family and my life. When I finished, Jeannie's eyes welled up with tears of sympathy for me, and she laid her head on my chest, offering comfort. It was comforting to have someone who could empathize with what I had been experiencing. Then, in a gentle, quiet voice, she shared what led her and her children across the country. She had enjoyed the perfect childhood, was the homecoming queen, and married her high school sweetheart. They went to college, earned their degrees, and started their family. However, at some point, things went awry. They started arguing, mainly about his flirtations with other women, which escalated into full-blown affairs. The arguments turned physical. Fortunately, the children were too young to grasp the turmoil. The possibility of divorce became a frequent topic in Jeannie and her husband's discussions. Then, a tragic call came one night from the police. A young woman had died in a car accident, and her deceased husband was thrown from the wreck, apparently engaged in a sexual act at the time of the crash. From there, it was a nightmarish ordeal. Jeannie was blamed by her in-laws and the deceased girl's family, and to some extent, she blamed herself. The estate slowly went through probate, with her in-laws' legal action significantly reducing her late husband's assets. Then, the dead girl's family filed a lawsuit, forcing Jeannie to countersue despite the challenges. She persevered and decided on a fresh start. She chose our neighborhood after researching various parts of the country, using all her resources to buy her house. Now, she was left with the hope of a job in the school district and an underperforming hedge fund, which she would need to tap into for her expenses until her job began. Unexpected house repairs also drained her savings, yet she had no regrets about her move. We sat in silence, reflecting as the swing gently moved. Then, I offered to examine her hedge fund account, confident I could improve its performance. She fetched the files, and I promised to review them overnight. She asked me to return them the following evening when we would have dinner. After a goodnight kiss and returning home, I scrutinized her account and noted the unethical practices of the manager, who was not only corrupt but also incompetent in his stock selection. I was certain I could achieve a 30% improvement in her account within a year. Preparing my notes for Jeannie, I still thought about her kiss. Dinner at Jeannie's included delicious food, children's games, and bedtime stories. This time, I read to Kate, wished her a good night, and prepared for a colder evening indoors. Needing the table for my analysis and projections for Jeannie, I had everything ready as she came down, and we made another pot of coffee. She inquired what I had discovered. I informed her that she was being deceived and offered my assistance. As I started to elaborate, she moved towards the den, curious. I questioned if something was amiss. She reassured me nothing was wrong, expressing her trust in me, thus negating the need for explanations. She suggested we head to the den to unwind. Following her, we settled in for a conversation that lasted into the night as the fire in the hearth dwindled. I acknowledged that despite our age gap, the comfort I felt with Jeannie in this brief period surpassed that with Denise. After a good night kiss, I left with her authorization to manage her stock portfolio and an open invitation for dinner. Upon awakening, I set about securing Jeannie's financial well-being. I informed her previous broker of his termination and my takeover. His resistance waned when I hinted at contacting the SEC. Shortly, he consented to refund Jeannie all his fees, amounting to $5,000, evidenced by a swift electronic confirmation. A mere 10 minutes effort allowed me to start optimizing her investments, disposing of unprofitable stocks for more stable ones, and allocating the rest to high-risk, high-reward stocks requiring vigilant oversight. I opted not to charge her for my services. By day's end, I was content with my achievements. Dinner next door was a joyful affair. When I attempted to discuss the day's events, Jeannie interjected, assuring me of her trust and dismissing the need for daily updates. Hence, I persisted with her portfolio management, enjoying her company nightly. Weekends transitioned from solitary home improvements to exploring the city with Jeannie and her children. However, this wasn't entirely accurate, as I also assisted with repairs at Jeannie's home, applying my skills to propose various solutions for her to choose from. Our relationship's pace was dictated by Jeannie, evolving from kisses to more intimate moments once the children were asleep, maintaining boundaries she felt comfortable with. The arrival of Jeannie's brother, Ree, and his family marked a new chapter. We barbecued steaks, and I sought to make a genuine impression, knowing Jeannie would value his opinion. I openly expressed my love for Jeannie, and my intention to marry her when she felt ready, acknowledging the importance of his perspective. Despite our recent acquaintance, Ree recognized my support for Jeannie and the children from the start, affirming our compatibility. But he cautioned against causing harm, lest we confront a serious conflict. Our mutual understanding was sealed as we clinked beer bottles and brought the steaks indoors. After dinner, Billy and Kay escorted their cousins upstairs while Jeannie and I conversed with Ree and his spouse. Our discussion evolved to a point where Ree and Jeannie started sharing awkward moments from their youth. Jeannie would laugh loudly in playful ejection as Ree kept going, drawing out the story. Eventually, Ree glanced at his wife and suggested, "Sweetheart, let's put the kids to bed, and then head to sleep in Jeannie's room." With this suggestion in the atmosphere, we all bid each other good night quietly. Jeannie and I joined hands as we made our way into my home, to my bedroom. We experienced the most passionate and unforgettable night together. I'm unsure how long we spent basking in the satisfaction afterward, but soon, we both realized that our exertions had made us hungry. As we chuckled and got up from the bed, I grabbed my shorts and was about to put on my t-shirt when Jeannie mentioned she had claimed it as her attire. I felt a surge of affection for her as she teasingly wore my shirt like a dress, and we headed downstairs, raiding the fridge. Our chat was calm and natural as we navigated from being acquaintances to friends and then to intimate partners. Every look I took of her at the kitchen table, sitting with her legs casually propped up, wearing nothing but my t-shirt, intensified my desire for her. I scooped her into my arms and carried her back to my bedroom. As I gazed at her and wondered, I knew I was ready to do anything for her, to defend her fiercely, ensuring nothing would ever separate us. It was in this moment of unexpected joy that I recognized the distinction between Denise and Jeannie. The era of grieving the past and immersing myself in work was concluded. It was time to embrace life anew. I nestled close to Jeannie, draping my arm over her as a shield through the night. We both sensed the promise of a joyous morning ahead. After sharing a good-night kiss, we drifted off to sleep. Time flew until one day, the doorbell echoed unexpectedly, revealing Denise, her companion Paul Starling, alongside Susan and Brian. I had somewhat anticipated their return, informed by rumors of their arrival in town. Denise expressed she had a proposal for me, awaiting my reaction with the door shut behind them. Their unease was palpable, given my lack of hospitality. After a brief silence, Denise overcame the awkwardness. She admitted her mishandling of our past and expressed a desire for reconciliation. It emerged that Paul was the fraternity member paired with her by her sorority, igniting a rivalry unbeknownst to us. Denise had continued her liaison with him, admitting their relationship was a toss-up regarding her pregnancy. Denise hoped I'd understand the children's wish to connect with their biological dad. As she spoke, I managed to keep my anger in check, silently listening to her justify her actions as being in the best interest, especially after my career had plateaued. This led her to seek the best possible outcome for her children through divorce. This was the reason she had demanded half of the profits from the sale of the marital home, despite the fact that I had been the one to make all the mortgage payments. Now, to the heart of the matter. The family was planning to return to Atlanta, excited by her imminent elevation to partner status. News had reached as far as Chicago about the recent revitalization of the area where my grandmother's house was located. Everyone was eager to purchase and renovate the ancient mansions back to their original splendor. Denise was aware that I had been let go from the brokerage firm following our divorce and, as a result, could not afford to maintain my grandmother's house as it deserved. She offered to transfer ownership of the marital home to me and settle the mortgage. Moreover, she presented a cashier's check for $100,000. All I needed to do was transfer the deed of my grandmother's house to her, and we would be square. I remained silent as she waved the check, her arm eventually lowering as my silence persisted. I gently asked them to enter, and I thought I detected smug smiles on their faces as they did so. They were audibly surprised upon seeing the foyer illuminated by a grand crystal chandelier. I described in detail the work I had done to restore the entrance to its former grandeur. Next, I guided them to the living room, where the room's fine details were complemented by luxurious, tasteful furniture. I elaborated on my restoration efforts for each room, which they observed with astonishment, appreciating the transformation of my home. The sight of the conservatory showcasing a Steinway grand piano elicited gasps from Susan. She had always been interested in music, but the best I could provide during her childhood was an electronic keyboard. She touched the piano wistfully as we moved on. We then ascended to the spacious, inviting bedrooms, finishing in the master bedroom, bathed in soft natural light. The master bathroom featured a walk-in shower with several shower heads and a large, re-enameled clawfoot bathtub adorned with gold leaf. Leading them to the balcony, they viewed the Olympic-sized swimming pool, a pool house, and a jacuzzi on the patio deck. I showed them through each room, eventually arriving at my study. I spoke about the mahogany paneling and my search for the right furnishings to match the decor. I indicated the valuable first editions in the built-in bookcases as my pet golden retriever, Butters, came to sit beside me on the couch. Denise, who had always disliked dogs, looked disapprovingly, but her preferences were of no concern to me now. After the tour, I questioned whether they truly believed I would consider moving back into that place of prior unhappiness. Before anyone could reply, my children burst in excitedly, recounting their visit to the aquarium. "Daddy, we're back from the aquarium," Billy exclaimed. "It's aquarium," Kay corrected him, without dampening his enthusiasm. They proceeded to tell me about their adventure, with Billy concluding, "But Daddy, our aquarium is better." A sentiment Kay echoed, referring to the wall aquarium I had built for them in the basement. Denise, taken aback by the sudden interruption, received no explanation from me. As my pregnant wife, Jeannie, appeared, wondering about our guests, I hurried over to her, inquiring about her well-being. Guiding her to a seat, rewarded by her affectionate smile and a kiss, I then announced, "They're not guests. They are just leaving." As they departed, I was aware they had countless questions and would never uncover the answers. Such is why I immediately left the house upon my return from Chicago and moved back into my grandmother's residence. Once inside, I noticed that the structure of the house was still robust, and I could refurbish it by myself, for the most part. This restoration became a significant part of my healing process. The other portion of my healing occurred at work. Over the years, working at brokerage firms, I discovered numerous methods a broker could employ to bypass the firm's security measures and pose a risk. Even though I was officially required to approve all transactions through my manager, I essentially had free rein to conduct trades due to my reputation as a prudent and reliable trader. However, upon my return from Chicago, I opened an account under a fictitious business name and started trading with the firm's money. By the end of the day, I had made several thousand in profit, which I then returned to the firm's funds. I deleted the transactions from the firm's computers, leaving no trace, and I was on my way. I was aware that what I did was unlawful, but I justified it to myself by considering the substantial profits I had generated for everyone I had worked with over the years. I was content with this form of retribution for a single day. The following day, I resumed trading aggressively and earned $10,000 by the market's close. This pattern persisted throughout the week as I doubled or tripled my investments. When I had amassed close to $200,000, I took a short position in several overvalued tech stocks. My timing was impeccable, and I earned 600% profits on each without facing a margin call, bringing my worth to over $1 million. Then my manager, who had previously criticized me harshly, demanded access to the account. With a few clicks, I transferred the funds to an offshore account, confronted him, told him off, and resigned immediately. Since then, I have continued to prosper, which is why I had no reservations about agreeing to Denise's property settlement. In her haste to secure her assets, she overlooked checking mine, which have continued to expand significantly. Until I met Jeannie and saw a new beginning. When I married Jeannie, I finally disclosed how much money she had in her account. She nearly passed out at the mention of $2 million. Actually, she nearly lost consciousness when I informed her that I possessed a net worth of $400 million. Then, I let her know that I owned every residence in a block area surrounding our homes. Her house had been the only one I hadn't managed to buy, and it turned out to be the best investment I never made. One last thing Denise would never realize is the extent to which wealth correlated with power. Such a vast fortune necessitated significant legal management, a considerable part of which I had Denise's firm manage, even though she was oblivious to it. I made it clear to enough of the senior partners how displeased I would be if Denise were made a partner. This is if she still possessed a law license. You see, Denise and Paul had visited the bank holding the mortgage on her marital home and had illicitly signed my name on the documents for a second mortgage to secure the funds for the cashier's check they tried to tempt me with, also burdening me with a second mortgage. Unfortunately for them, they were unaware that I also owned the bank and had instructed to be personally notified about any suspicious activity on that account. Now my close friend, the district attorney, whom I had supported in the last election, would be pressing forgery charges against Denise and Paul. Moreover, he promised he would ensure they both lost their licenses to practice law. As I ended the call with him, I pondered whether Denise would represent herself or opt for a public defender at her trial. She wouldn't have much left after the disclosure of the low-income Section 8 housing development project next to my good friends, and the Homeowners Association was made public. A contracting firm under my conglomerate would construct the project, which would plummet the property values of the homeowners. Since I had bought the land to donate, providing me with a tax deduction from some of my yearly earnings, it all connected. As I sat next to my beloved wife, elevating her feet into my lap and softly massaging them, while our adopted children watched TV with their cousins who had moved into Jeannie's former house, which she had bequeathed to her brother, the sighs of contentment from her delighted me as she gave me a smile. The kind of smile that heralded a special night indeed. Every night with Jeannie was extraordinary, as I grinned back and kept massaging her feet. This story impresses with its depth and intensity of emotions, captivatingly narrating the journey of the main character through life's trials, the search for inner strength, and the discovery of a new path to happiness.